Good afternoon and welcome to Tuesday Talks at the White House, a weekly invitation for people around the country to engage with administration officials and policy experts. Thanks so much to everyone that's joining us online and for sticking with us. This Tuesday Talk, although originally scheduled for Tuesday, has now been bumped to Wednesday as a result of the President's press conference. But we're excited that it's today because this is the actual one-year anniversary of the Open Government Directive, which is an unprecedented directive that requires federal agencies to achieve key milestones in transparency, participation, and collaboration. And so today, answering your questions, we're so pleased to have with us the Administrator of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, Cass Sunstein, Chief Information Officer Vivek Kundra, and the Chief Technology Officer Aneesh Chopra. Thank you so much for being here today on the one-year anniversary.
Thanks so much. I think I might begin by talking about some of the animating principles that have driven our Open Government Directive. They came actually from the President. The first idea is we want to get information across to the American public that they can readily find and use. Those are the President's terms. So on data.gov and many other places, people can get information about products that have been recalled so they can protect their families. They can get information about car infant seats, what is easy to install and what is hard to install. They can get information about automobile safety and crime and air pollution. So there's been an unprecedented avalanche, really, of information being provided to the American public. That's number one. Idea number two is that the President's referred to the fact that the public has a lot of information that the government doesn't have. His term is dispersed knowledge. And so what we're very alert to is that when we're making rules or making decisions or trying to come up with solutions to social problems, often there's a lot of information out there that the private sector has that government officials really could benefit from and make better decisions as a result. So one thing we've done in the rulemaking area is really to open up the process to public input so that before a rule is made, we benefit from the public's perspective and information. Another thing we've done is to devise open government plans themselves in a way that benefits from people's ideas about what they could use or what would be helpful for consumers or citizens or more. So that's the idea about benefiting from dispersed knowledge. The third idea is to use sunlight as a disinfectant, an idea that goes back to a Supreme Court justice named Louis Brandeis, who emphasized the importance of accountability. And here the idea is that for government itself, if it's using taxpayer money or if it's imposing restrictions on the private sector, it needs to hold itself accountable. And one thing we've really been insistent on doing is to an unprecedented degree using sunlight as a disinfectant. When we're trying to encourage desirable behavior from the private sector, sometimes we've used sunlight as a disinfectant there as well. And those are the three animating ideals, and they have achieved a great deal in practice over the last year.
Well, let me try to bring that to life in terms of execution. We've had a very exciting last 1 year in terms of actually delivering against those core principles. So when it comes to accountability, as many of you know, we launched the IT dashboard to shine light on the performance of the government around $80 billion of investments. Well, what's been exciting is that a year later, after shining that light on IT investments, we've been able to terminate a number of IT projects. More importantly, we've been able to reduce the budget significantly of IT projects, approximately $2 billion. More important than actually reducing the budget is the fact that when we're implementing these large, complex systems, we've been able to actually cut down the time it takes to deliver services to the American people. On average, that used to be 2+ years. And now we're doing it within an average of 8 months. And that's directly related to shining light on those investments. Second, we've been able to, for the first time, provide subcontracting data so people can actually see on ussspending.gov what money is going, taxpayer money is going from prime contractors to subcontractors, how it's being spent, and what the public is getting for that money that's being spent. In another area, as Cass mentioned, around the data.gov platform, we've been able to see remarkable innovation and growth in that platform as a result of the Open Government Directive. We went from 47 data sets to today, where we have over 305,000 data sets on every aspect of government operations, from product recall data that Cass mentioned, to data around healthcare that's changing the way people make decisions on a day-to-day basis, but also creating an entire ecosystem of innovation. So based on the data.gov platform itself, just to share some statistics with you, what we have is over 236 new applications that have been created. 9 other nations have followed the United States lead, 7 states and 9 major cities. OECD yesterday just released data on educational outcomes after they interviewed 15-year-olds across the world. And so this is for the first time data that's been made available on data.gov that allows us to see how the United States stacks against other countries all over the world. The other thing we've seen is a platform for innovation as a result of opening up government. A number of challenges have been launched on the challenge.gov platform. And what we've seen is that people have been able to help us create new applications or are working hard on finding the next innovation that will replace the incandescent light bulb. So dozens of challenges have been put on challenge.gov. But as we reflect on the 1-year anniversary, tremendous progress has been made when it comes to the open government agenda. And what we're most proud of is the fact that we're shifting power here away from just the government to the American people. And we're holding government accountable. We're making sure that we're driving innovation across the broader economy and producing better results.
And we look forward to answering your questions, but just 3 final points before we get to them. The first is on where we are from the perspective of our agency adoption and implementation. We see broad and deep adoption of the open government principles in the agencies themselves. Every one of the agencies that is reflected on our open government dashboard has now met the satisfactory requirements of their participation. They all have open government plans. They've been very transparent around their implementation milestones, and they're engaging with external parties to ensure that they're meeting those milestones as they come up. In addition, agencies on the depth perspective have built innovation teams within their agencies focused on achieving these principles and turning them into reality. Second point, we're being very aggressive on the spirit of accountability. On the issue of accountability, we just mentioned the fact that we have a dashboard, as I said, you read on the yellows and greens for the agencies that have performed well in our open government assessment, but that is complemented by external parties who are equally holding us accountable and measuring our performance. Some see opportunities for improvement, and we work on them as we get that feedback. Last principle here is the path forward. The path forward is to focus the 2011 year on civic participation. We've seen as a platform that we've been described on data.gov and others on how we're supplying information, fostering those ecosystems in the form of programming interfaces, APIs for developers, encouraging more participation in rulemaking, as Cass is working on, and more broadly tapping into that principle that Cass outlined of tapping into the expertise of the American people. This is the focus of 2011 as we move forward. With that, we look forward to engaging on these questions.
Great. So for the past couple of days, you've been sending us lots of your questions on whitehouse.gov and Facebook. So we've got a stockpile of questions. There's also a live chat that's happening right now. If you go to whitehouse.gov/live, there's a link to join the Facebook chat where we have a very active discussion. I'm going to kick things off with a question that came in through whitehouse.gov from Armory Meltzer in New York. And the question is, what types of data are now more easily accessible because of the directive? What data remains unavailable to the public, and what, if any, should or will be made more readily available?
So let me start with what data is available that wasn't before. One is there was data that actually the government was charging for. For example, CMS used to provide healthcare data, Medicare data, on a CD for approximately $100. And now that data is now on data.gov for free. And as we look across the government, when you look at 305,000 different data sets, I would encourage you to go on data.gov, because one of the things we've done is we've also made available publicly, transparently, you could actually see who submitted which data set, when they submitted it, who's using it as far as statistics, how many users are going to that specific data set. So we're being very, very open about how the data is also being utilized. In terms of data that's not made available, obviously, we have to be sensitive around privacy and national security. When we look at what we call the mosaic effect, today, more than ever, more and more information is out there. So the ability to actually triangulate information is much easier than it used to be. So for example, with healthcare data, you can make that data available at the state level and it has no impact. But if you make the same data available at a zip code level, all of a sudden, in the rural parts of the country, you may be able to identify individuals. So agencies are looking at, what we're doing and making sure that we're hardwiring privacy protections as we make that data available publicly.
One ad on Armory. I missed the first name of the gentleman.
The first name was Amory.
Amory, I would encourage you to think of an agency that you think would have information you'd like and visit that agency's Open Government plan. Typically, they're at hhs.gov/open. The Labor Department is dol.gov/open. You'll see the inventory of high-value data that the agency has kept and its commitments to make those particular data sets available, and an opportunity for you to offer feedback if they have information that you'd like to see made more accessible. So there is a process to get your input more directly addressed on the agency-by-agency basis.
Great. So this question just came in through the live chat on Facebook. If you're just joining us, go to whitehouse.gov/live where you can hop into the conversation that's happening on Facebook, and we're going to try to answer as many of your questions as we can. John Moore asks, the number of data sets is only important if they're useful data sets. How many are being used by third parties to create applications?
We have dozens, I think, of applications now, but I want the first part of the question is clearly right, and thank you for that. The numbers, in a way, bury the question in chief, which is how's the information being used. I'd say two things. A lot of the information, whether or not there's a private application developed, it's incredibly useful. You can find information about air quality. You can find information about product recalls. You can find all sorts of information about automobiles and about airlines. Information that sometimes is available in real time and really useful in real time. Having said that, apps are also often particularly simple and easy to use. We have dozens now. Is that so?
200 plus. Yep.
Okay, so over 200. And what is pretty exciting about the 300,000 plus that you'll see in the future is that the potential for private adaptability and use is enormous, really. And what we're going to see over time, really every few weeks, is more developing. But if there's something that you're quite interested in, if it involves air quality or crime or what's happening in the Social Security Administration, which often affects people in our families, well, we can get that, basically, you can get that within a matter of minutes.
And just to add to that, this is where we need your help in terms of prioritizing the data sets. So you can go on data.gov and you can actually go on there and literally vote on how useful a data set is, how important it is, and you'll also see which data sets are being used more than others. But I would also like to make the point that usefulness is a very relative term, because certain data sets are useful to a small population, but they're very, very important. Or they're extremely useful when it comes to accountability, but there may not be millions of people who are looking at that data set. So I think as we look forward, that's one of the areas that we're going to be doing a lot of work on, is to crowdsource which data sets people want. And agencies, frankly, need your help in terms of helping them identify the demand side.
Thank you. This next question comes from Marlon Brown. This came in through whitehouse.gov. Marlon's in Mason, Michigan. The question is, how can open government initiatives be more effectively implemented at the local levels of government?
Well, let me begin by saying, in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation, we're seeing a number of local governments voluntarily participate in this movement. Vivek cited the statistics. He might repeat some of those activities. But where we have federal programs that require state and local implementation schedules, we're embodying the principles of open government throughout. So we just recently published the standards by which the new health insurance exchanges will come to play in the years 2014 when the health reform legislation kicks in on the issue of insurance exchanges. Those involve states and localities engaging, and the technical standards that have been adopted to support that program embody these principles of open government. So where we are engaging in ways that the federal government, the states, and the local governments are coming together, we're seeing more and more of the agencies embody these principles, and on their own, voluntarily, they're doing the same.
Right. I mean, if you just look at the number of states, 17 states are part of this open government movement, 9 major cities, and countless cities all over the world. The key here is just think about, as both Aneesh and Cass mentioned, the usability of some of this information. Think of just the everyday decisions all of us make when it comes to the weather. That's data that's coming from the National Weather Service, where we're getting information real time, so we decide whether we should take an umbrella or wear a coat. In the same way, at the local level, the transportation grid, for example, in Washington, D.C., for example, you can download an iPhone app that's powered by data coming from the metro system that allows you to see where the closest metro station is, when the next train is coming, so you can make a better decision. Imagine at the local level having that type of data, whether it's around transportation, crime, healthcare, and coupling it with state and federal government data. And then if you lift up even more at a global level, we've been working very, very closely with the UK on their Open Government Data Initiative to try to slice and dice and cube a lot of data to create really useful applications, not just in the United States, but at the global level.
Okay, this next question comes from Facebook, and I think it's a nice segue from the usability of data. Victoria Stossel asks, even if government opens up and gives out information, what steps are being done to actually educate the public?
By the way, that's why we said that the year of 2011 will focus on engagement strategies. In fact, we just this week will be releasing a public request for information on the notion of expert networks. Basically to the point that Cass raised at the outset, you might have information that would be relevant in the judgments of the policymakers in Washington, or information that could be useful in your own personal life. How do we tap into your knowledge in the formation of policy issues or finding ways to improve local performance on schools or what have you? This request for information that will be published this week, if not actually today, on the Federal Register, will call out a new expert network program or a platform that will allow us to answer that question hopefully a bit more programmatically. In general terms, we were doing our very best to get the word out that these opportunities exist. We've created these ecosystems. In healthcare, there are over 1,000 developers that convened in Silicon Valley just to think about opportunities to mine the healthcare data for benefit. We're seeing the same movement happening in energy and in healthcare. So you're seeing domains pursue it. We're hoping in chats like this to get the word out further.
I could say a little bit about this in the area of regulation. When you think of regulation, you might think about occupational safety or education or energy or the environment. And what we've done in terms of education is refurbished our key websites, reginfo.gov and regulations.gov, so they're much clearer and easier to use. They're not exactly educational, but we have a kind of pilot program called Regulation Room, which has really educated the public about a rule involving passenger protection on airplane. It's a proposed rule, and we're interested in public comment to see if we've gotten it right. And that really is an educational enterprise, and it's achieved the goal of obtaining a great deal of public input on the proposed rule.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from Bill Harshaw in Reston, Virginia. This came through whitehouse.gov. Bill asks, are you going to publish any metrics on usage of open.gov and data.gov, etc.? How do we know such sites are becoming an effective use of taxes? And a lot of people in the chat are sort of asking similar questions.
Well, so Bill, I would say that the dashboard that we launched, Aneesh and I, last year, very early on, tracks the performance of the Open Government Initiative. And on data.gov, we actually have made all the metrics completely transparent. So you're actually seeing exactly what you're seeing in terms of usage across the world, which data sets people are using, which ones they're not, how they're voting, and so forth. So all that information is already public.
It's important to note from a financial standpoint, Bill, much of the information that we're making available, because we've embedded these principles moving forward, the marginal cost is actually relatively low in order to publish this information. Right. And the more important point is that there's no taxpayer dollars involved in building out private sector applications on this information. So in a sense, just take the First Lady's Apps for Healthy Kids contest. The Department of Agriculture had funded a game that would help kids better understand their nutritional choices. And it was a game that's available at usda.gov, and it's been there for many years. It's a wonderful thing, and I hope your kids enjoy it. But by putting the data set out there and putting out a little bit of a competition to see what people could do with this, we saw over 100 applications built without a single nickel of taxpayer dollars in terms of developing those applications. We simply honored and celebrated those winners that came forward in the competition. Some of those folks have started new businesses and they've quit their day jobs. They think this is an opportunity to actually make some money by providing nutritional information. So we funded originally a game for kids, and that may have happened years back. And now we saw 100 built that didn't require us to fund the actual last mile, if you will, the final development. We supplied the data, and the private sector did its part to innovate.
Well, Melody Chamley just chimed in the chat. She said, "This is fantastic. How do we advertise
this initiative?"
Melody.
Thanks,
Melody. She asked, how do we advertise this initiative even more? What can people like Melody do?
Well, what you might do is first look at the developments that have come from the Open Government Directive. So you can get the Open Government Directive just by putting it in your relevant search engine. You could go on data.gov. You can look at, as Aneesh mentioned, the agencies all have Open Government Plans /open. HHS/open might be one that's close to that. OMB has its own. And just look at them. One thing that's particularly noteworthy, I think, in terms of things to spread is all of the agencies have flagship initiatives, which are things they're really proud of. At OMB, we have something that puts all our rules, all the rules that are now under review, makes them open to the American public, so you can actually see what is on the agenda and might or might not be coming, depending in part on public comment. The State Department has as its flagship initiative something called humanrights.gov, a site that hasn't existed before, which will give a ton of information about human rights practices all over the world. So I would say there's a lot of information out there. It's easily available. And then just to talk to people so they can find that information that they can, in the President's word, use.
And Melody, the other thing that I would add is that, look, open government is not a point-in-time initiative where you just launch it and it's done. This is going to be the way the Obama administration is going to govern. And we recognize that we don't have a monopoly on the best ideas. So as we move forward, what's going to be really, really important is to hear from people like you which aspects of the data or the practices of government do you want open, and how do you want us to shine light? Because it's also not just about technology, right? It's not just about here's a data set or here's a cool little application. It's a fundamental shift in how you govern. And we're here to serve you, and we need to hear from you to take this to the next level.
Melody, I want to just say one final story on this point. I want to tell you the story of Adam Bosworth. Adam is an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. He attended a meeting and he raised the question. It was a question about healthcare information. And the question was, why can't there be a simple way for me to download my healthcare data from whomever holds it today? From that sentence, he encouraged a whole movement that has now come out in the form of a program called Blue Button, where the Veterans Administration, under the President's challenge, which he issued back in August, said, Adam, you're absolutely right. If you're a veteran and you're one of the 1 million veterans that have an account on the website myhealthyvet.gov, you should be able to download your own healthcare data. So the President said in August, this is Adam's idea, the President said, yeah, I think everybody should have this, and I challenge my VA to make it available in the fall, and I challenge others that have the same data. Well, they responded, and Medicare, the DOD, and the VA, to all of their existing account holders, they said by October 7th, every one of you now can download a copy of your own healthcare data by pushing a little blue button, where well over 100,000 Americans have downloaded their own healthcare data because Adam said this is a piece of information that would be useful. So Melody, I don't know what's in your brainstorming, what your ideas might be, but if we hear them, we can execute on them, and we can do so in a collaborative manner.
Great. This next question comes from Richard Robbins. That's a question from the live chat that's happening on Facebook. Richard asks, a big part of open government is having a two-way conversation with constituents. Can you talk about how senior White House officials are interacting online or otherwise, and how this two-way interaction has had a tangible impact on policy?
I can say something we did very soon after the Open Government Directive a year ago today, which is we issued guidance enabling the government to interact more freely with the American public in a way that respects the limits of a law that's of great importance called the Paperwork Reduction Act, which imposes some restrictions on how the government can ask questions to people. This opens up the social media for interactions. In many areas, including the open government area itself, agencies are engaged in recurring dialogues with people to try to get their ideas. Aneesh referred to a terrific example just now, but on openness itself. We're also engaged in continuing discussions with respect to our own decisions and practices. In the rulemaking area, something I spent some time on, if the public comes in with comments on a rule, and we're trying to make that easier and easier every day, then the agency is under really an obligation to respond to the comments in the final rule to make sure that it's addressed the concern and explained why it's proceeding in the face of the concern, or explaining how it's changed its original proposal because of the concern. So openness is practice with respect to rulemaking and with respect to openness itself.
And I'll give you just one more example. We were one of the first customers of CAS's new guidance. We had to issue a rule on, actually CAS authored a rule on the issue of healthcare information technology, how we would implement a program the president has called for to help modernize the nation's healthcare system with the adoption of information technology to make our healthcare system more efficient and effective. And we decided to use a blog to get public input specifically around the issue of should the rule, how might you interpret the rule so that it actually works. A solo family physician in Northern Virginia came forward and said, this sounds great, but I cannot email my patient's medical records to a doctor in Arizona because my patient's moving from Virginia to Arizona. So he related this story about how he couldn't literally, safely, and securely email using public email. He was worried it would violate all kinds of security concerns. So we listened to him and said, he's absolutely right. And so under his recommendation, we launched basically a collaboration. Let's get the techies in a room and figure out what do we do to make safe, secure email a possibility. That was because it came out of our two-way communication from the public. That led to the Direct Project, which is available at directproject.org. 80 companies, all voluntary, all private sector, came together and said, here's the technical specification to make safe, secure email to trusted parties a reality. And the first private sector commercial offering was announced in October. So thanks to CAS's recommendations and guidance, we've now turned to blogs and other tools to get that input. Individual doctors who don't have to hire lobbyists and all these crazy things can come forward, bring their ideas, and we're listening. We're listening and we're trying to take action where we can.
Okay, thank you. This is actually going to be our last question. It comes from Thomas A. Breyer. Thomas asked this on Facebook, and a number of people have been asking similar questions. What steps might you begin to take to institutionalize the principles of transparency, participation, and collaboration, potentially beyond the Obama administration?
Well, I do think this is a long-term initiative that doesn't get constrained by any particular administration. And what we've done with that is issued both the president has issued presidential memoranda, and they've been followed by documents from subordinates, and these tend to be lasting unless there's something, some reason they're outrun by time or they're politically contentious. Openness in general is something that is now commanding a great deal of bipartisan interest and enthusiasm, and structures have been put in place over the last year. We referred to the /open sites, and those structures, they're working so well, and they're receiving such enthusiasm from people, no matter their political perspective, that it looks like the structures will last.
And I would say the other thing that we have to be able to do is execute, right? At the end of the day, once you deliver, for example, how government performs You hardwire it into the DNA of the public sector. And from a demand perspective, imagine somebody going out there and saying today, you know, we're going to get rid of GPS, or we're going to get rid of the Weather Channel, or the information that comes out of there. It's not going to be possible because it's so hardwired into the broader economy, and everyday Americans use that information to make meaningful choices. So I think leading by execution is a key way to hardwire this.
A final observation, if I may, it comes down to people as well. We have a director of our Open Government Initiative. Her name is Beth Novak, and her key motto has been to work with agencies at all levels, those who are political appointees that come and go with administrations, but more often than not, those who've been here, who work for the agencies and see this as an opportunity. Thanks to leadership, we've built this from the ground up, in a sense, so that we have both leadership from the top in terms of setting the vision and the goals, but execution and support from those on the ground. And I want to just personally thank Beth as we wrap up for the great work she's done this year on executing, her and a whole number of folks that aren't with us on this particular web chat.
Well, I would just like to mention Richard Robbins, who we responded to a question of his earlier, and I think this sort of alludes to what we're trying to achieve here within the Open Government Directive, and generally said, thanks for answering my question. It's pretty impressive for me to be able to type a question into my computer in NYC. Within 3 minutes, have senior folks at the White House respond to me. So keep at it. Well, thank you, Richard. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. This video, if you joined us late, will be posted shortly on whitehouse.gov, and we will see you next Tuesday.